Have you ever noticed how some people become incredibly close to you, only to slowly disappear afterward? At first, everything feels effortless. They text first. They laugh at your jokes. They want your attention. They make you feel seen, valued, important. And just when you start believing the connection is real, something changes. Their replies become cold. Their energy fades. They stop trying. Conversations feel forced. You begin questioning yourself, replaying every interaction in your head, wondering what went wrong. But what if I told you something disturbing? People often ignore you not when they stop liking you, but when the psychology of the relationship changes beneath the surface. And the terrifying part is, most people never notice these invisible shifts until emotional distance has already taken over. Tonight, you're going to understand the hidden psychological reasons why people pull away after getting close. Because once you understand human behavior, you stop blaming yourself for every disappearing connection in your life. Human beings are emotionally driven creatures, but emotions are unstable by nature. In the beginning of every relationship, the brain experiences uncertainty. Uncertainty creates excitement. The person doesn't fully know you yet, so their imagination fills in the missing pieces. Mystery activates curiosity. Curiosity activates dopamine. And dopamine creates emotional intensity. This is why the early stages of friendships, relationships, and emotional connections often feel addictive. The brain becomes obsessed with anticipation. Every message feels exciting. Every interaction feels meaningful. But psychology reveals something dangerous about familiarity. The more predictable something becomes, the less stimulation the brain receives from it. Over time, the emotional high begins fading. What once felt thrilling slowly starts feeling normal. This doesn't mean you lost your value. It means the novelty disappeared, and many people mistake the loss of novelty for the loss of emotional connection. Modern relationships are heavily influenced by dopamine addiction. Social media, instant messaging, and constant stimulation have changed the way human beings experience attachment. People today are addicted to emotional excitement more than emotional depth. They crave the rush of new attention, new conversations, new people, and new validation. The moment a connection becomes emotionally stable, some individuals unconsciously start searching for something else to stimulate their brain again. This is one reason people suddenly begin ignoring others after getting close. The connection stopped feeling emotionally intense, so their brain started chasing novelty somewhere else. And unfortunately, in a world obsessed with endless options, many people no longer know how to maintain deep emotional bonds once the initial excitement fades. There's also another painful psychological reality most people refuse to admit. Sometimes people become close to you because of what you emotionally provide, not because they genuinely value who you are. Human beings are naturally attracted to emotional benefits: attention, validation, comfort, entertainment, support, distraction from loneliness. Some people enter your life because your presence temporarily satisfies emotional needs they cannot fulfill on their own. But once those needs change, their behavior changes too. This is why certain people disappear the moment they feel emotionally better, find new distractions, or receive attention elsewhere. It feels personal, but often it has more to do with their emotional dependency patterns than your worth as a human being. Psychology also shows that emotional imbalance silently destroys attraction over time. Every relationship functions through emotional exchange. Effort, energy, attention, and emotional investment flow between two people. But when one person begins investing significantly more than the other, the dynamic changes. The relationship becomes psychologically unequal. The more emotionally attached one person becomes, the more pressure the other person unconsciously feels. This creates emotional suffocation. Human beings are naturally drawn toward emotional freedom. The moment a relationship starts feeling emotionally heavy, many people instinctively pull away to regain psychological control. That's why chasing people after they become distant often pushes them even further away. The more desperate your energy becomes, the less emotionally attractive you appear. And this leads to one of the darkest truths about human psychology. People are often more attracted to emotional challenge than emotional certainty. This doesn't mean toxic behavior is healthy. It means the human brain values what feels psychologically stimulating. Confidence, independence, mystery, emotional self-control, and unpredictability create curiosity. But overavailability can slowly remove emotional tension from a relationship. When someone becomes completely certain they can never lose you, they may unconsciously stop valuing your presence at the same emotional level. This is called psychological adaptation. The brain adapts to emotional certainty and begins taking consistent attention for granted. That's why emotionally secure people with strong boundaries often appear more attractive. Their energy communicates self-respect rather than emotional dependency. Another reason people ignore you after getting close is emotional exposure. In the beginning, people are attracted to idealized versions of each other. They see potential, fantasy, and emotional imagination. This is called projection psychology. Instead of seeing the real person, they see the version they created in their own mind. But eventually, emotional closeness reveals reality. Flaws become visible. Differences emerge. Insecurities surface. Human imperfections replace fantasy. And for emotionally immature individuals, the collapse of fantasy feels like loss of interest. In reality, they were never attached to the real you. They were attached to an emotional illusion created by their imagination. Childhood experiences also shape adult emotional behavior in terrifying ways. Many people unconsciously repeat emotional patterns they learned growing up. Someone raised around emotional inconsistency may associate unpredictability with love. Stable affection feels unfamiliar to them. Another person raised without emotional validation may constantly crave external attention, but struggle to maintain deep attachment once emotional comfort appears. Trauma creates invisible relationship patterns that continue into adulthood. This is why some individuals become intensely attached at first, then suddenly withdraw once emotional intimacy becomes real. Their nervous system mistakes emotional closeness for emotional danger. Fear of vulnerability plays a massive role in why people ignore others after getting close. Emotional intimacy requires exposure. The closer someone becomes to you, the more emotionally visible they feel. And visibility creates fear. Fear of rejection. Fear of abandonment. Fear of losing control. Some people unconsciously create emotional distance the moment a relationship becomes too real because closeness activates unresolved emotional wounds. Instead of communicating their fears, they withdraw. Silence becomes protection. Distance becomes emotional armor. There's also the psychology of social value. Human beings constantly evaluate relationships subconsciously. People are influenced by status, confidence, emotional energy, independence, and self-perception. The way you see yourself affects how others emotionally respond to you. Individuals with low self-worth often unintentionally communicate emotional insecurity through their behavior. Over-apologizing, seeking constant reassurance, fear of abandonment, excessive emotional attachment. And while these behaviors are understandable, they can slowly create emotional exhaustion within relationships. Emotionally healthy people are naturally drawn toward those who appear psychologically stable and emotionally grounded. One of the biggest mistakes people make after someone becomes close is abandoning their individuality. In the beginning, attraction often exists because someone has their own life, goals, energy, and identity. But once emotional attachment grows, many people slowly lose themselves inside the relationship. Their entire emotional world begins revolving around one person. This creates unhealthy emotional dependency. Psychologically, dependence reduces perceived value because it removes emotional balance. Human beings are attracted to people who enhance their life, not people who emotionally collapse without them. Another disturbing psychological reality is that some people enjoy the process of gaining attention more than maintaining connection. For certain individuals, the chase itself is emotionally addictive. Winning someone's attention boosts their ego and temporarily increases self-worth. But once emotional certainty appears, their interest fades because the psychological challenge disappeared. These individuals are often unconsciously addicted to validation rather than connection. They crave emotional pursuit, not emotional responsibility. Social media has made this problem even worse. People now have constant access to attention, validation, and endless alternatives. Human beings were never psychologically designed to handle infinite emotional options. The brain starts developing unrealistic expectations about relationships. Instead of appreciating emotional consistency, people become addicted to novelty and comparison. This creates what psychologists call grass is greener syndrome. People start believing something better is always available somewhere else. And because of this mindset, emotional commitment becomes weaker. Sometimes people ignore you after getting close because they discovered parts of themselves they weren't ready to confront. Real emotional connection acts like a mirror. It exposes insecurities, fears, emotional wounds, and hidden vulnerabilities. Some individuals become uncomfortable when someone truly understands them because emotional intimacy removes the masks they hide behind. Instead of facing that discomfort, they withdraw emotionally. Overthinking also destroys relationships faster than most people realize. Once someone becomes distant, the brain enters emotional survival mode. You analyze every message, replay conversations, look for hidden meanings, wonder what changed. But anxiety changes behavior. The more afraid you become of losing someone, the more emotionally unstable your actions appear. Fear-based communication creates pressure, and pressure often pushes emotionally distant people even further away. This is why emotional self-control is one of the most attractive psychological traits a person can develop. There's another painful truth about human behavior. People treat you differently once they believe they fully understand your emotional patterns. In the beginning, unpredictability creates curiosity. But once someone learns your reactions, fears, attachment style, and emotional weaknesses, they may unconsciously stop feeling the same psychological excitement. Mystery disappears. Emotional tension fades. Predictability replaces curiosity. This is why maintaining individuality and personal growth is essential even inside close relationships. But maybe the hardest truth to accept is this: not every person who enters your life is meant to stay permanently. Some people are temporary emotional experiences. Some are lessons. Some arrive during periods of loneliness, confusion, healing, or personal transformation. And when that internal chapter changes, the relationship changes too. The pain comes from expecting emotional permanence in a world where human emotions constantly evolve. Emotionally intelligent people understand something powerful. Another person ignoring you does not automatically mean you are unlovable or unworthy. Human behavior is influenced by trauma, insecurity, dopamine addiction, emotional immaturity, fear of vulnerability, childhood conditioning, and internal emotional conflict. There are psychological battles happening inside people that have nothing to do with your value. And this is where many people destroy themselves emotionally. They begin chasing explanations from people who cannot even explain their own behavior. They seek closure from emotionally confused individuals. They beg for clarity from people who are disconnected from themselves. But closure rarely comes from another person. Real closure comes from understanding psychology, accepting reality, and protecting your emotional stability instead of sacrificing it for someone else's temporary attention. One of the strongest things you can do when someone ignores you after getting close is refuse to abandon yourself emotionally. Do not beg for attention. Do not destroy your self-respect trying to force connection. Real emotional bonds do not require constant confusion, anxiety, or emotional exhaustion. Someone who genuinely values you will not repeatedly make you feel invisible. Sometimes silence itself is communication. Distance is communication. Emotional inconsistency is communication. Human beings reveal their priorities through behavior more than words. And while rejection hurts deeply, it also reveals emotional truth. It forces you to stop idealizing people and start seeing reality clearly. The frightening truth about relationships is that many people love emotionally, not consciously. They follow feelings instead of understanding them. They seek intensity instead of stability. They confuse excitement with compatibility. And because emotions constantly change, their behavior changes too. This is why attachment becomes dangerous when your self-worth depends entirely on external validation. The strongest individuals are not the ones who never experience emotional rejection. They are the ones who survive it without losing themselves. They understand that someone else's inability to maintain emotional consistency does not define their value as a human being. They continue growing, healing, improving, and protecting their peace instead of obsessing over people who emotionally disappeared. And maybe the most important thing to understand is this. People who ignore you after getting close are often revealing their emotional limitations, not your lack of worth. Deep emotional connection requires maturity, consistency, vulnerability, communication, and psychological self-awareness. Most people crave connection, but very few are emotionally prepared to maintain it when things become real. Human psychology is complicated. People want love, but fear vulnerability. They seek attention, but lose appreciation for consistency. They crave closeness, but panic when emotional intimacy exposes their insecurities. And understanding these psychological patterns will not completely remove the pain of being ignored, but it will stop you from blaming yourself for every emotional shift happening inside someone else's mind.